The world stands on a knife's edge, holding its collective breath as uncertainty grips every continent. It's March 24, 2026. 5 days have passed since the world was thrust into chaos. 5 days since the planet stared into the abyss of a new world war, with headlines screaming fear and uncertainty. American and Iranian forces have traded devastating blows, leaving cities scarred and families shattered. Oil prices have soared to record highs, stock markets have crashed, and families everywhere watch in fear, wondering what tomorrow will bring. The question on everyone's mind: is this how World War III begins? Is this the moment history changes forever? Then, a sudden, uneasy silence. A 5-day pause that feels both fragile and ominous. The guns are quiet, but tension simmers beneath the surface. Soldiers pray, families hope, and leaders calculate their next move. This isn't peace, it's a countdown. Every second ticks closer to either catastrophe or a fragile reprieve. 5 days for leaders to decide: escalate the conflict, or pull back from the brink and seek a path to peace. For Iranians, it's fear and hardship. Daily life is shadowed by uncertainty and the threat of more violence looms. For the world, it's a moment to hope reason prevails, that cooler heads will find a way to stop the spiral. A US-Iran war would not be contained. The flames of conflict would spread, igniting new fronts and drawing in nations far beyond the Middle East. Allies and rivals, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, would be drawn in. Oil would stop flowing, economies would falter, and the world order would tremble. The consequences would reach every home on Earth, from empty supermarket shelves to the anxiety in every parent's eyes. In Washington, President Trump weighs strength against the cost of war, knowing every decision could change the course of history. In Tehran, the government faces pressure from hardliners and a restless public, torn between pride and survival. Secret talks begin behind closed doors, but the fate of millions hangs in the balance, dependent on fragile words and uncertain promises. The next days will decide: step back from the brink, or plunge into darkness. The world is watching, waiting, and hoping for a miracle. The crisis began with Operation Epic Fury, a bold and unprecedented joint US-Israeli strike targeting Iran's nuclear and military sites. This operation marked a turning point in the region, shattering years of uneasy tension, and igniting a conflict that would soon spiral far beyond its initial scope. Under the cover of darkness, stealth bombers and precision-guided missiles struck targets across Iran, aiming to cripple its nuclear ambitions and disrupt its military infrastructure. The world watched in shock as explosions lit up the night sky, signaling the start of a new and dangerous chapter in Middle Eastern history. Iran's response was swift and fierce. Within hours, hundreds of missiles were launched at US military bases and Saudi oil fields. The region was plunged into chaos as flames engulfed critical infrastructure, and the threat of wider war loomed large. Most dramatically, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, a vital choke point for global energy. This single move choked off a fifth of the world's oil supply, sending shockwaves through international markets and raising fears of a prolonged crisis. Oil prices soared overnight, gasoline costs tripled, and global markets crashed. Panic spread as investors scrambled to respond, and ordinary people felt the impact at the pump and in their daily lives. Airlines canceled flights, shipping routes were hastily rerouted, and economies around the world reeled from the sudden disruption. The ripple effects were immediate and severe, touching every corner of the globe. The world plunged toward recession, with businesses shuttering and unemployment rising. Headlines warned of a looming economic catastrophe, and uncertainty gripped financial centers everywhere. Hundreds died in the initial strikes and retaliations, as cities burned and emergency responders struggled to keep up with the devastation. The human cost mounted with each passing hour. In Iran, ordinary people bore the brunt of the conflict, facing relentless airstrikes, soaring prices, and empty shelves in stores. Daily life became a struggle for survival as basic necessities grew scarce. Food and medicine became increasingly scarce. The humanitarian crisis deepened as families lined up for dwindling supplies and hospitals ran out of critical drugs. International aid groups sounded the alarm, warning of catastrophe if the fighting continued. Relief efforts struggled to keep pace with the growing needs of millions caught in the crossfire. The mounting military, economic and human toll finally forced both sides to agree to a temporary pause, a fragile ceasefire that offered a glimmer of hope amid the chaos. This fragile window is all that stands between further escalation and total disaster. The world watches anxiously, knowing that the situation could change in an instant. The world holds its breath, hoping for a way out, as leaders scramble to find a diplomatic solution, and families pray for peace. The stakes are enormous. Global stability, millions of lives, and the very future of the Middle East hang in the balance. The countdown to the next move has begun. What happens next will shape history for generations to come. Day 1 of the pause, March 20th, brings a tense silence. The world seems to hold its breath as the sun rises over empty streets, uncertainty hanging in the air like a thick fog. Behind the scenes, secret channels flicker to life, encrypted messages dart across continents and shadowy figures move quietly, carrying words that could change the course of history. Swiss diplomats trusted by both sides shuttle messages between Washington and Tehran. Their footsteps echo in marble hallways, each delivery a fragile thread connecting two bitter rivals. The first exchanges are cold, almost icy. Demands are far apart. The US insists on immediate inspections, while Iran demands sanctions relief before any concessions. President Trump addresses the world, mixing threats with an offer to talk. His words are carefully chosen, balancing pressure with the possibility of peace. In Iran, the regime is shaken. Supreme Leader Khamenei faces mounting pressure from furious hardliners who see compromise as weakness. Some demand more attacks, calling for vengeance. Others, fearing disaster, see negotiation as the only path to survival. The IRGC's hardliners want revenge, pushing for escalation, but moderates urge restraint and diplomacy, warning of catastrophic consequences. The pause becomes a battleground for Iran's future, war or negotiation. Every debate in parliament, every whispered conversation, shapes the nation's fate. Moderates argue that war with the US would be suicide, risking everything Iran has built. They plead for a chance at peace. They push to sideline hardliners blocking talks, fighting for a voice in the chaos. The first 2 days are not just about talking to the enemy, they're about a battle for Iran's soul, a struggle between hope and fear. The world watches, hoping for a breakthrough. In capitals from London to Beijing, people gather around screens, waiting for any sign of progress. Every hour, the risk of collapse grows. Tension mounts with each passing minute as leaders weigh their next moves. The stakes could not be higher. The fate of millions hangs in the balance as history waits to be written. Day 3, March 22nd, Tehran stuns the world. Supreme Leader Khamenei removes hardline IRGC commanders, replacing them with traditional officers. It's a gamble, a signal to Washington that pragmatists are gaining ground. Hardliners erupt in protest, chanting for revenge, and denouncing traitors. The regime now faces war on two fronts, the US and its own radicals. On day 4, Iran's economy collapses further. Oil exports at zero, currency in freefall, food and medicine scarce. The UN warns of humanitarian disaster. The US offers aid if Iran allows inspections and proves hardliners are sidelined. It's a test. Is Iran's new leadership truly in control? The offer is a carrot, but the stick of sanctions and military threat remains. The crisis deepens, and the world waits for Iran's next move. The clock is ticking. Day 5, March 24th. The world counts down the final hours of the pause. Secret talks intensify. Senior officials now negotiate directly. A fragile deal emerges. Iran dismantles missile programs and allows inspections. The US lifts sanctions in stages. In Washington, President Trump faces pressure from hawks and allies who distrust Iran. Some urge a second strike, others warn of catastrophic war. In Tehran, leaders walk a tightrope. Agreeing to a deal risks backlash from hardliners. The government frames compromise as victory, but scars from Operation Epic Fury remain. For ordinary Iranians, this is life or death. 5 days of fear, hope, and uncertainty. Every rumor, every headline could mean peace or war. The fate of millions hangs in the balance. The final hours are a moment of truth. The world waits for a decision. The next move will shape the century. We stand at a crossroads. The 5-day pause is ending, and two futures are possible. One path, fragile peace, diplomacy, and hope. The other, regional war, global chaos and devastation. The choice will echo for generations. A deal would avert catastrophe, stabilize economies, and prove diplomacy's power. War would unleash destruction, collapse markets, and cost millions of lives. The Middle East could burn for decades. This is a test of leadership and humanity. The tools of war are powerful, but so are the tools of dialogue. Both sides know the price of failure. The world waits for their answer, and once again, the world holds its breath.